It is time to begin. Welcome to this webinar hosted by the Pennsylvania Association of Notaries, PAN. The title of today's presentation is Notary Penalties. We will discuss the reasons notaries are penalized by the Pennsylvania Department of State. My name is Brian Crocker. You can see that from the screen. I'm joined by fellow instructor John Morensel and education coordinator Natasha Grigorski. We will begin with a presentation led by John and then have time for you to get answers to your questions. Please, though, hold your questions until after the presentation is complete. We don't want the chat box to get away from us. We estimate our webinar will take about 45 minutes to an hour of your time. Let's begin.
All right, so I'd like to welcome everybody here to today's webinar, which we have titled Notary Penalties. In this webinar, we're going to discuss the top 3 reasons so far in 2021 why notaries in Pennsylvania have been penalized. Keep in mind, this webinar does not meet your education requirements for the Pennsylvania Department of State. So if you're here for renewal, this does not satisfy the education requirements. Before we start, I just want to remind everybody that you do have the option to pop up the chat box. Everybody will be muted for the duration of this meeting. If you want to chat with us or ask a question, you will want to click on the chat box icon. That's going to be at the top or the bottom, depending on where you have your toolbar located. And like Brian mentioned, please hold your questions until after the presentation is over. This will make it easier for us to answer your questions. So to start with the presentation, a common question we get at PAN is, how can I get in trouble? To be quite honest, notaries aren't penalized by the Department of State very often, but it does happen. The Department of State doesn't come out and do random audits of notaries. Now, if you are a PennDOT contracted agent, you might be audited from PennDOT eventually. One time or another, it's going to happen. But as a standard notary, it typically doesn't happen. So how do you get in trouble? Well, anyone can file a complaint against you for any reason. This could lead to the Department of State contacting you and questioning you about the situation, requesting copies of your journal entries, and perhaps more. A lot of times, the notary doesn't get in trouble for the initial complaint, but they get in trouble for not having other things in order. So let's talk about the top 3 reasons why notaries have been penalized so far here in 2021. First reason we're going to talk about will be personal appearance. The second reason is going to be identifying the customer. And then our third and final reason we will cover today is going to be journal keeping. So first, let's talk about demanding personal appearance of the customer. What you're going to see here on the screen is a real life scenario that we found on the Department of State's website on why a Pennsylvania notary was penalized. So a notary in Delaware County failed to require personal appearance. And here were their penalties. They had their commission suspended for 6 months, immediately stayed in favor of probation, levied a civil penalty of $1,000 and a probation assessment of $300, and they were required to take 6 hours of mandatory notary education. So personal appearance isn't using FaceTime, Skype, Microsoft Teams, or even Zoom, like how we're meeting today. Personal appearance isn't your customer calling you on the phone, telling you that they're emailing you or faxing you a document for you to notarize, even if you know that person. And personal appearance isn't when you have a coworker, a boss, or an employer drop something off on your desk. They ask you to notarize it for them by the end of the day and to return it to them later. Personal appearance is when you and the customer meet face to face, being able to physically exchange items like ID and documents. The only time the notary and customer are not physically together is during a remote online notarization. Remote online notarization, also known as RON, began March 25th of 2020 for limited transactions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Since October 29th of 2020, RON is permanently part of the notary law. RON is when an approved notary and a customer meet using only state-approved audiovisual technology. For more information on remote online notarization, I would highly recommend checking out our YouTube page. There we have pre-recorded webinar already happened when Ron first came and passed into law. The name of that webinar is it's called Remote Online Notarization Webinar. Then it has a date, which was November 20th, 2020. I also recommend checking out the Department of State's website. There, you can see the differences between electronic and remote online notarization and the steps you would need to follow to become a remote online notary. So that is the first step that we're covering, or the first error. So the second one we're going to cover is identifying the customer. So here is that second real life scenario. A notary in Philadelphia County failed to ID their customer, and here are their penalties. They had their commission suspended for 12 months, but they immediately stayed in favor of probation, levied a civil penalty of $500 and a probation assessment of $600, and they were required to take 6 hours of mandatory notary education. So you can ID your customer with either personal knowledge or satisfactory evidence. Personal knowledge is used for somebody that you know without a doubt. It could be a family member, could be a friend, could be a coworker, or could even be a neighbor. But it needs to be somebody that you know without a doubt. If you don't know that person or that customer without a doubt personally, you want to make sure you get a form of satisfactory evidence, which can either be acceptable ID or a credible witness. To be acceptable, the notary law requires that the ID to be government issued. It needs to be current, so it cannot be expired. Needs to contain a signature or a photograph, and it also needs to be satisfactory to the notary. Now, the last way you could ID your customer is by using a credible witness. And at PAN, we consider a credible witness to be a method of last resort. The credible witness must make a verification on oath or affirmation that the individual appearing before the notary is the person named in the document, and the credible witness personally knows the individual appearing before the notary. The important part, if you're using a credible witness, no physical IDs can be exchanged in this situation. The credible witness acts as the middleman. The notary knows the credible witness personally, and then a credible witness knows the customer personally. No IDs are exchanged. The last topic that we're going to cover here today is going to be journal keeping. So here's our last real life scenario. A notary in Adams County failed to properly maintain a notary journal recording items including the date, character, and/or parties to the notarial act. So they actually voluntarily and permanently surrendered their notary commission. So they're no longer a notary now. You're required to keep a journal for all the acts you perform. Make sure you're entering one journal per entry, or one journal entry per notarization. A saying that we say at PAN is one stamp, one entry. Your journal entries need to be completed at the time of the notarization before the customer leaves. Let's cover what information needs to go into the journal. So, first thing we're going to cover is the date and time of the notary act. This is when the customer is in front of you and you perform the notarization. Type of act. You're going to list the notary act that you performed for your customer here. Document description. You can either scan over the document and list what the document's pertaining to, or you can list the title of the document if there's a title. That's going to be your call. Notary fee. Did you charge a notary fee for the notary act you just performed? If you did, you're going to list it there. Clerical and/or administrative fees. Did you charge for your services? If you did, you will list a fee there. If you are an individual that does not charge fees and you do this strictly for free, don't leave the fee columns blank. You want to put a 0 in there, a 0 with a line, NC for no charge, NA. All those can be acceptable. Next thing we're going to cover is the customer name and address. Now, this is important because this is a change. No longer just the city and state is acceptable. Now, the full name and full address of the customer is required, which includes the street number and name, city, state, and zip. In previous seminars, we have previously taught city and state only. That was due to the proposed regulations at the time saying city and state were sufficient for the address. The proposed regulations were not accepted, therefore the full address is now required. Our answers will change from time to time, depending on changes to the law and or regulations. Our courses are state approved for the first time in renewing notaries, but unfortunately things change periodically. We recommend you stay up to date with the most current notary information. We will do our best to keep you up to date. You can stay up to date by following us on our social media platforms, reading emails that Pan sends, and Notary Notes. Notary Notes has made its return earlier this month, and it's back in digital form. So that is, if you are a member of PAN, you will get that every month. Identification method. You will check the appropriate box on how you identified your customer. Identification details, excuse me. So if you personally knew the person, you will put a dash here or an NA, or you could put how you know them. If you checked acceptable ID, you want to list the ID you accepted, and then the issue and expiration date if the ID had an issue and expiration date. And last but not least is going to be the remarks section. This is one column that is optional. The only information you want to make sure you don't put in here is personal identifiable information of your customer. So, to summarize, always demand personal appearance of your customer. At PAN, we consider it the golden rule. Always ID your customer. As a notary, this is the most important thing we do. And always keep a chronological journal of your notarial acts. If a document comes into question or someone files a complaint against you, your journal will be the proof of what you did or did not do for the customer. Let's now open the floor up to any questions you might have.
John, thank you for that great presentation. I do want to ask you one question. When's the last time you used the word levied in everyday conversation?
Not very often. As you can see, that's from the state. That's not from me, right?
I was laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was glad I had my mic off. So the first question I can see is from Fran. When did the full address requirement take place? The exact date I can't tell you, Fran, but we received official notification sometime last month.
Yeah.
And we notified you as soon as we knew.
Is the full
Right.
address required even if even if a person is known to me?
Hold on one second here. All right. Yeah. So full address is required even if you personally know the person. The address can be where the person's from, or it can actually be where the notarization is taking place. The address itself is not defined under the law or the proposed regulations, so it could be one or the other. Me and Brian always say we recommend if you're taking an ID, take the address that's off the ID, but technically you could use where the notarization is taking place as well.
I think Marie's question is basically the same.
Same with Stacy's.
Yeah, go ahead. If you're going to read them out loud, I don't mind. I forgot we were doing that.
It's up to you.
Can we list our business address if we are notarizing for a fellow manager, staff member, or does it have to be their home address? The law doesn't really say one way or the other. So John and I actually, if we notarize for someone and we ask for ID, we use the address on the ID. But if you notarize for somebody at work that you know personally, you don't actually know their physical address, I would have no problem telling you to list the work address or the business address.
Karen asked for the act, is abbreviation acceptable or does it need to be the number? It's actually doesn't say in the law or regulations if abbreviation would be acceptable. The one thing that is okay is if you are going to abbreviate something, there's a section in the very front of the journal where there's a spot. If you're going to abbreviate something, you need to clarify what it means. That's something I would probably recommend. I know, for example, our key that we have set is state approved. So I can't speak on any other way that would be used. But if you're going to abbreviate, I would make sure I would throw it up in the front of the book.
Okay. Is the customer's address or the location where the notarization entered. And I guess that's what the question is I'm interpreting. It is supposed to be the customer's address. Now, whether that be their home address or if you're doing it at work, the work address doesn't matter, but it's not necessarily the location where the notarization is taking place, because the law says the customer's full name and address.
If we work in a very busy office, is it legal if the office saves electronic copies of all the documents needed in the notary journal? I'm always upfront with this first and foremost. I'm not an attorney, so I can't give out legal advice. I can't speak on if it's legal or not. What we're going to recommend at PAN, though, in that situation, we do not recommend keeping copies, whether it's electronic or paper, of any documents that you notarize. The reason being, it's not required by Pennsylvania notaries. Your proof on what you did is going to be your notary journal.
Is their address personal information? The way the state defines personally identifiable information is information that's not accessible to the public. Because addresses are accessible to the public, it's not considered to be personally identifiable information.
And then we did address that. Brian did answer that about the date when it began, when that change happened. So I'm not going to answer that there.
But she said, should we go back?
Oh, there we go. Should we update our journals? No, so that's a good part. Yeah,
No.
You do not want to go back. The Department
No.
of State is well aware because they knew what we were teaching. They approved our course the way it was. We read it. We wrote that course with Rolona and the proposed regulations at the time, which is what the state wanted. Unfortunately, the proposed regulations were not accepted the way it is. So they're well aware that there's many notaries out there that have only been put in city state for years. But from here on out, you want to make that change to go the full name and full address.
When you no longer want to be a notary, do you have to turn in the journal? The answer is the law says yes. When you are no longer a notary for whatever reason, your journal or journals or registers are supposed to be turned into the county recorder of deeds where you last maintained an office of record. And actually, they put a time frame to it. It's 30 days.
Says, hello, everyone. When you say full name, is that just first and last names, or must I ask for the middle name too? Middle name would not be a requirement. That would be optional. If you want, if they give you the ID and has it on there, if you want to put it, that's okay. First and last is going to be acceptable.
Kathy wants to know, what is the normal charge for notary fees or for the service? There is a fee schedule that was made by the state and that you're not supposed to exceed. I don't have it readily available, but if you send us an email to instructors@notary.org, we can send you that information.
So if using a passport, just ask them for their address. That's one way that you can go about it. So I'll give you a scenario, what I like to do. If I'm notarizing for my customer and I ask them for ID, I'll take the address that's on the ID. Now, if I personally know the person or the ID doesn't have the address, what I'll do is I'll use the address of where I'm doing the notarization. So if I was at PAN, I would use the business address. If I was meeting somebody at a location, I would use the address of that location. So I kind of use both.
Can you use a stamp for the address if you do many notarizations for your employer, or do you have to write it out? Oh, stamp is a great idea, as a matter of fact.
I'm doing notary for my employer at the same address. Can I use a pre-printed label for the address? So the stamp is a good idea. I would not recommend, I know Brian, Natasha, they're on the same page, would not recommend the label. And the reason why not doing the label is you could peel it off. The stamp is permanent. It's in there. So that's why I would stay clear of the that label.
So I don't have to put anything in the identification details if I choose or if I know the customer personally. Nothing's required. I would actually draw a line there, but you don't have to put information there unless you absolutely want to.
Alyssa says, I did not receive any email notification from PAN about the new full address. If I haven't attended today's webinar, I would never have known the new important information. Was this sent via email? We updated it on our social media, which was Facebook, it was a part of our notary blog, but also in Notary Notes as well. That's the 3 areas that we updated our members.
Just to
As soon as we
piggyback it,
got,
yeah, well, Notary
right?
Notes went out, what, April 1st?
Yeah,
Yeah.
around
If
now.
you didn't get it, that could mean that if you're a member, we don't have your correct email address.
So you'll definitely want to contact customer service if you're not receiving the digital, because it's a great resource. And the reason why Notary Notes used to be every other month, we now are doing it every month, and we made it. The companies decided to make it smaller so we can get the information that changes out to you more frequently.
Sorry to step on you there, John.
No, not at all. Yeah.
At a webinar last year, we were told as a non-PennDOT approved notary that we should not do title transfers. Is this still the case? That is still our recommendation. You can do title transfers. You can actually notarize any document that requires a notarization. The issue with title transfers and other PennDOT paperwork is you can screw it up and cost someone money, and you probably don't have access to all of the paperwork necessary to complete the transaction anyway.
Yep.
Jeannie asked about the label for the address thing, and again, the stamp's going to be your best bet, Jeannie. There, don't use the label for the address. John says I did 32 notarizations for the exact same person yesterday. Mortgage docs on 3 properties. It took forever to list the address. Still haven't caught up. Now I'm behind on recording other stuff, and just make copies of whatever I do now until I get to it. Any suggestions? Well, I'll just tell you here. The state recommends you do all your notarizations contemporaneously. That's how it's written in the law. So they want it to be a part of the act. I know it seems like that would be impossible, but that's what they want to see. When it comes to suggestions on how to make it quicker, I think the stamp for the address could be a solution. Now, if you're dealing with different customers and you're always going to have a different address, there's not much you can do in that situation, unfortunately.
If using commonly used abbreviations, for example, RD for road, AVE for avenue, ST for street, JR for junior, must this be clarified or defined in the beginning of the journal? No.
Dan asks, for the driver's license IDs, should we record the driver's license numbers or just the expiration date? Yeah, the only information you want to list from the driver's license and what's required is what type of ID it is, then the issue and the expiration date. The driver's license number is something that you would not want to put in there, the full driver's license number. That is personal identifiable information. If you want to put the last 3 in the remarks section, there's no harm against that, but do not put the full number.
When we moved our offices to a new location, many boxes were missing. What if we don't have journals from years before the move? Honestly, Susan, there's nothing you can do about the past. What I will tell you, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here, you are ultimately responsible for your journal. It belongs to you exclusively. If you're storing it somewhere where other people have access and relying on other people to do something with it for you, that's probably not your best bet. But again, just to answer your question, there's nothing you can do about the past.
Somebody asked, what is our Facebook page listed as? I don't think I have it. If you just search the full name, Pennsylvania Association of Notaries, you will see it. If you give it a like or a follow, I think it's a like, you will get updates whenever things posted and things on that nature. And we have a new social media coordinator that posts, it seems like almost daily. There's a lot of good information out there. So we're trying to be more frequent with the information. And we're going to get back to these webinars. Our hands were really tied and our time was consumed with getting our Zoom classes off the ground. But now that we got that under control, you're going to see more webinars and way to keep everybody updated.
So you just addressed Terry's comment?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that's what you did, but then I got lost in the shuffle reading.
No worries.
Yeah.
Do I need to buy a new journal to keep the info such as identification, etc.? I notarize only for work, so everyone is known to me and all are at the same address. Unfortunately, Robin, unless your journal meets the Rulona compliant requirements, then you shouldn't be using what you're using. And we go as deep as if it's paper, it needs to be bound with pre-numbered pages, pre-numbered entries, and it needs to include all of that information that John shared with you today. Whether it's the same for everybody or not doesn't really matter.
Diana did us a favor, which thank you,
Thank you.
Diana. She posted a link to our Facebook page. That helps us out. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Mhm.
And Estelle just said Pan has a video about transfers in PA when it comes to car titles and what sections you can and cannot do. Yeah, that is one thing. If you do want to do one, technically you can notarize anything that requires notarization in Pennsylvania. Do we recommend it? Absolutely not. But if you want to, that's what the video is there for, just to show you what's needed, because there is a lot of information that's required.
Fran says, when I first started being a notary, Pan had an electronic journal. Should we bind those journal entries? Honestly, Fran, that was before Rulona took effect, so it wasn't under these requirements. So if they are electronic, you can leave them electronic. If anyone ever wants to see them, or if you stop being a notary and you need to turn them in, printing them out, you know, nothing fancy with the binding, but yeah, at that point you would want to print them out.
Beth asks, if the document description is the same for consecutive entries, or either for same or different people, can you draw a line or arrow down in these columns only? It's not going to be the popular answer, but the correct answer is no. Unfortunately, you can't. One stamp down means one complete journal entry. Even if the information is the same, we can't put a line down. We can't use ditto marks. Can't put like ×3 in the remarks section, things on that nature. I know that's not a popular answer, and we get a lot of pushback on that, but that's unfortunately what the state requires.
So I'm going to address Diana's comment and Carolyn's question. Diana is sharing a link to a networking site on Facebook. The only thing I would caution you is it's like anything else. If you're relying on somebody other than the expert for information, you could go down the wrong path. So if you're a PAN member, please rely on us. Please use customer service to ask your questions. In the identification block, could I use a stamp that says driver's license with issue and expiration? Of course, filling in the state and the dates. Absolutely. I highly recommend stamps if you have them made.
Yes.
And then somebody did ask about updating. You don't want to update the address column, just leave it the way it is. I know we talked about that. Somebody liked the Facebook page and liked it, and they gave Diana a thank you. So awesome on that. Are you allowed to announce on social media that you are a notary public? Sure. Yeah, there's no issues with that. The law does read, though, if you're going to advertise your services as a notary, that you need to include a statement that talks about how you're not an attorney, licensed to practice law in the Commonwealth. There's certain things that you're supposed to put on the disclaimer. So I would read the notary law for Lona. You can get that on the state's website, and it's actually in there, so you can get that disclaimer.
John actually has a suggestion. Since the full address is now required, PAN makes the number of lines in their journal fewer on each page, maybe 8 instead of 10, to allow for more space for filling out the full address. It's not a bad suggestion, John. I'm not sure that that's something we can do right now. I know that the journals that have just gone to the printer are still going to be 10 lines per page. They have removed the indicator in parentheses that says city and state, but for future, that's something we could possibly think about. Why don't you do this for me, since I'm probably going to forget? Why don't you send that suggestion to instructors@notary.org, and we can pass that on to the powers that be.
Awesome. All right. So may I buy a new journal if my old one has some space in it yet? If you have a journal still that's still compliant with everything that's required and there's still space in it, you want to continue to use that one until it's filled up completely, and then you'll get a new one. Now, if you have a old register, for example, that doesn't have all the information that's compliant, if you do have available spaces in that, you want to write on the next available line that you switched over to a journal on a certain date, cross out any of the remainder lines, then you would buy a new one. So it just depends if you have one of those old registers that doesn't have the information, or if you have a new journal, continue to use it.
Could we just use the zip code and exclude the city for the sake of space? I would not do that, no.
No.
It says customer's full name and address.
The admin and the mod, and Diane is saying the admin and the mods of the PA group keep a tight lock on the group and remove any wrong info. We also often refer folks to PAN for questions we don't feel comfortable with, include education equipment. And I share your page often. Well, thank you, Diana.
Oh,
That's
nice.
great. And I think it's great, that, as a community, notaries have other areas to conversate, bounce things off, maybe you have scenario-based questions, things on that nature. But like Brian said, when in doubt and you're a PAN member, take advantage of that membership. It's a big part of the fee when you buy that reappointment package. So yeah, definitely take advantage of it.
Yeah, again, I wasn't trying to say don't network. I was just trying to say definitely be cautious. And I'm glad that the administrators pay extra special attention to what they think might be wrong information and they remove it. I recently started a new job at a different employer. My first journal was specific to my old employer. Do I need to purchase a new journal for my new employee? The answer is no. The law actually says that your journal cannot be seized by a former employer. You are supposed to take it with you and you are supposed to continue to use it.
John says he's going to play devil's advocate here. If you guys are so tight with the state, why can't you make more suggestions to them to make it easier for notaries, like not having to pull addresses and such, or to record full addresses and such? And wouldn't it be prudent to allow PA license numbers to protect notaries against ID fraud? Wouldn't it be smarter to actually have it? Why doesn't PAN make those kind of suggestions? I'm going to answer the second suggestion first. When it comes to the ID itself, the reason why you can't put that full driver's license number in the journal is because the journal is a public record. So by law, if you have a customer, anybody off the street comes in and they request to see a page of your journal, by law, you need to give them a certified copy of it. Now, if somebody in the public gets somebody's driver's license number with their name, they could do some damage with that. So that's the reason why they leave that out. When it comes to the first part, Mark is a big Mark. When I say speak of Mark, Mark's our president at PAN. He does work. We have a nice working relationship with the state. We can make suggestions. He does go to bat for our members. He truly does. He's been a big advocate of trying to raise the notary fees for years, including when this notary law came into effect. But I don't know if Brian, if you want to add more to that or not.
Just to piggyback really quickly, we're not a lobbying organization.
Yeah.
So although we can talk to them, we don't specifically lobby. That's not what our purpose is. If my client is a foreign person, should I write his or her name in the language used in his or her ID or in English only? Never gotten that question before. I suppose if it's in another type of script, I don't know. That's a question I can't answer. I do know that if you accept someone's ID and it's in another language, you can only use it if it's in a language that you can read and understand. I know that's not your question. Honestly, a question I don't know the answer to. You have anything to add,
you
John?
could always email us.
Yeah.
Like Brian said, and we could do a little bit more, because that's something, certain things we're just not going to know off the top of our head. But what we can do for you is do a little digging and research and try to get you the answer that you're looking for. So email us, instructors@notary.org. Should we be whiting out the numbers from DLs if we've already had them in our journal? You do want to redact that information if you have that personal identifiable information, but you don't want to use a whiteout. I would use like a Sharpie, put a single line through, and then make notes on the page, at the top, if it's in the remarks section, for example, or just make a note that you're redacting personal information. That's why you have that, but I wouldn't touch anything else.
And Ludmila actually clarified, she said she's Russian and she notarizes for Russians. Then again, the law doesn't specify how you list the name and address. It just says the customer's full name and address. If it's in that script and you need to write it in that way, then I would write it in that way. But That's what I would do. And Stanley says, use what's on the passport.
He said, thank you. So right
You're
now,
welcome.
we're caught up on questions. We do still have a good bit of people in the room. So we'll wait. I mean, I know more are going to roll through. So let's see what we got here. Is it acceptable to use a non-certified interpreter for notarization where the customer doesn't speak English? It doesn't. They don't need to be certified, but when the main part is if you're notarizing something, you need the notarial language itself needs to be written in English. That's the main part. But yeah, with the interpreter, they don't actually need to be certified, but you just need to make sure that they are interpreting. I mean, the bet you trust them, I guess, would be the main thing. Maybe have them swear out an oath.
I want to go backwards. John said that we used to have a book that showed what IDs from other states and countries look like. Do we still have that, and do we keep it up to date? The answer is no. The one we carried for a time was from another publisher, and they wanted to sell a lot of books, so they updated it every 6 months so they could sell more books. They made us buy more than we could sell, and it was really cost prohibitive for us to carry them. If you want something like that, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. And I'm not advocating that you buy their book, but I think it was actually called Driver's License Guide Company, if I remember correctly. Try that. Try Googling Driver's License Guide Company.
And then somebody just asked about our email address. They wanted to email us a question, so I threw that in the chat box there. Then Shelly says, my journal reads customer name and address with parentheses, city and state. I took this to mean that's the only thing you needed was a city and state. And that is correct, Shelly. You might have joined late. The presentation, we did cover that to a degree where at the time when we had our journals created and we had our class submitted to the state, it was approved by the state. And we've been doing that for years now. The proposed regulations, they stated that city and state were sufficient, that the full address was not necessary. But the proposed regulations were not accepted written as is. So what that means is they are being rewritten as we speak. And so what's required now is the full address because that's what Relona requires, the notary law. So the state is well aware that there have been many notaries out there putting city and state only because that's what was required at the time. But now that has changed. So you just want to make sure from here on out, you don't want to go back and make any edits, but here on out, make sure you're putting the full address.
I like easy questions. Here we go. Can you notarize for someone that lives in another state if the notarization takes place in Pennsylvania? Yes.
Yes.
Kathy says, my employer wants me to make copies of IDs, use that with my notarizations and attach it to the document I notarize. Is this a good or is this a good legal practice? Again, I can't speak on what's legal or not because we are not attorneys at PAN. Wouldn't recommend it. That would be my suggestion. I would not recommend making the copies of the ID, and especially putting them to the documents. Just because end of the day, what you're notarizing, you could be potentially liable for. So what's required as the notaries when you do your notarizations, the only thing you do is once you place that stamp and signature down, you make your journal entry. That is the proof on when the customer was there, who they are, where they're from, what type of document it is. That's your proof.
So Lisa wants to know when you line through a complete driver's license number that was already recorded with a black Sharpie, what do you write at the top of that column? Actually, we had something that was standard from the state. I don't remember the exact wording, but I believe it was something like redacted information that was not required or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be probably something to that effect would be fine. Do not redact anything that's required, please.
Yes. Chris threw that information in about the ID guide. So that's awesome. Thank you for that, Chris. And you're welcome, Shelley. Yeah, that's what I figured. Sometimes, you hop in the middle, so no worries. If a customer comes in for a notary and I'm uncomfortable for performing the notary act for any reason, do I have right to turn them down? So you have the right to refuse service to your customer without explanation, as long as it's not based off of race, color, religion, national origin, sex or gender, pregnancy, disability, marital status. those types of reasons. If you just don't feel comfortable with the document, you're uneasy with the ID, you're unsure if they understand what they're signing, you could put a kibosh to it right then and there. You don't need to do it.
Okay. There's a comment from Diana. It probably relates back to the person who was asking about photocopying IDs and attaching them to the paperwork, but I'll let them hash that out. Let's see. If my client is a Spanish speaker and the documents are in Spanish, does the wording need to be in Spanish as well? If you're asking about the notary wording does need to be in English. The notary wording needs to be in English, regardless of the language that the document is in.
Kayla says, my class mentioned using the stamp for PA, but New Jersey, for instance, only accepts the embossing seal. Is there a list of what states accept stamp versus seal? To the best of my knowledge, the customer service team, if you contact them, they might have something on that, I believe, off the top of my head. I'm not sure.
We do have something on that.
Yeah, so if you do have a question on that, you can contact customer service. But what's good in Pennsylvania, for example, what's required here, which is your official stamp, if you notarize it properly here, technically by law, it needs to be accepted everywhere else. I know that's not always the case, because there are states out there that just want to see that seal as well, but that's why the embossing seal is no longer required here. Or, I mean, we don't recommend, or put it this way, we don't put it in any of our packages because it's not a requirement. But yeah, if you have it, still use it. It's not a bad idea if you can.
John and I are glad you're here, Natasha. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Because you can easily answer questions like that. I like that. So someone from the public can come in to ask to see your journal. Yes, it is a public record. You are supposed to share it with them. I would not allow someone to sit in a room by themselves and go through your journal. I would supervise. But if they say, I want a copy of that page, the law specifically says you are required to make a certified copy of whatever they ask for. Now, it doesn't say you can't charge them for it, but it says you need to do it.
A private question rolled in, so I'm going to go ahead and answer this one. When doing a remote online notarization and you are in one county and the signer is in another, do you use the county the notary is in or where the signer's at? To the best of my knowledge, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it's where the notary is at, because the notary needs to be in Pennsylvania, and that's where the notarization is taking place. That's where you are doing the notarization. So I don't know.
I missed the question. I'm sorry.
If you were doing a Ron notary,
yes,
the county for the venue, that reflects where the notary is at, not
correct.
where.
It's where the notaries, the notaries is when they're sitting behind their computer.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we're good there.
Why don't you take John's question, Natasha, since it's directed at you?
Yeah. Is there any chance that I speak Russian or Ukrainian? No. I wish, but I know.
Easy.
Yeah.
I think you've got that good ethnic name.
Yes.
Explain a gold seal. Oh, a gold seal notary. Yeah. Not a term that I've ever heard. Have you heard that term, guys?
I have.
Yeah.
What is that?
I haven't heard about it since I was a customer service rep. So I don't know if Natasha knows or not.
So it's when you put like a gold seal on a document and then emboss over it.
Oh. Well, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't think they called them gold seal notaries. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's not.
At least that's how I learned how to.
Yeah, it makes it look fancy.
Yeah.
There was a question up top. It says, so someone from the public can come in and ask to see your journal.
I already answered it.
You did already? Okay.
You're not paying attention, John.
No. Well, I thought you went to John's. So that's what threw me off.
No. I did it. And then I referred the question from John to Natasha because it mentioned Natasha.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Shout out to John. I attended your class in November and just took my test this week. Passed 98%. Congratulations, Lisa.
Awesome news. That's what I like to hear. Good stuff.
Does the public need to do a right to know form or just ask for the page? They don't need to do a right to know. They can just ask for it.
And I always tell people, because sometimes people stress over that. I don't think the public goes out and does it for fun. I wouldn't stress over it. but just know it is a part of the law. So that's why we do mention that, because that surprises some notaries that the notary journal is a public record. So that's why it's really important to leave that personal identifiable information on. I work at a hospital. If you know the MD and they have only their hospital ID, is personal knowledge enough? Absolutely. Yeah, if you know them well enough, the key is you need to know them without a doubt, first and last name. That's going to be up to you. If you feel you personally know them and you can ID them, you could use personal knowledge.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, it sounds like you're doing two things. It sounds like you're doing personal knowledge and asking for ID. It's either one or the other.
Yeah.
Now, we have congratulations for Lisa for passing her exam. Is a will regarding spouses required to be notarized in Pennsylvania? That's a legal question that I cannot answer. I would pose that question to a licensed attorney at law.
Amanda says, can I notarize a legal document for my relative? Example, divorce papers. There's nothing in the law or regs that says you cannot notarize for family or friends, but you need to make sure you do not have a financial or a direct interest. That's the key. So you just need to ask yourself, do I have an interest in this? Am I gaining anything out of this? If you're hesitating, if you're unsure, probably a better idea to have somebody else do it.
Eileen asks, is there an easy way to determine what type of act you are performing? There absolutely is. The act you are to perform is based on the notary statement that's already on the document. It's something I stressed over and over and over today in the reappointment seminar that I taught this morning on Zoom. If you're really interested, please send us an email to instructors@notary.org and ask us to send you the notary wording reference sheet, and that will help you out.
I also recommend, to piggyback off that, on our YouTube page, we have a prior webinar that talks about notary wording. It's a quick 10-minute presentation, and then there's a Q&A session like this at the end. So you don't need to stay the whole time, but I'd watch the first 10 or 15 minutes. It's a good presentation, and it's going to explain what Brian's talking about, and it's going to show that form that he's talking about too. So it could definitely come in handy.
I appreciate the compliment. Thank you, because that was my presentation.
Juanita says, if someone you know is serving as a credible witness for someone else that you're notarizing for, do you need anything other than their name and association for the journal? When you're notarizing that credible witness statement, that's one notarization. So whenever that, they're going to be technically your first customer, that credible witness. So you personally know them, you need to list their name, and then the address, the full address of that credible witness needs to go first. And then your second line is going to be whoever your original customer is. That's going to be your second notarization, and you'll need to fill that in completely as well.
Taryn says, where can I find a current list of notary fees? I don't have that readily available, but if you send us an email, we can send that list out to you.
And somebody just giving a suggestion, they said the Rolona rundown page, they keep it with their journal, talks
Right.
about do's and don'ts, talks about the wording. That is a good one as well. So that's a good idea. They said they have it. Great. Melissa says, I found the April 1st Pan Notary Notes email going forward. I'll save them. Yeah. So no, that's a good, yeah, definitely. Check every first of the month. You'll see Notary Notes going out to you.
We have another shout out to the practical guide. They use it all the time. Wow, that went by really fast. Can someone post the link to the Rolona rundown page? Yeah, we'd probably have to grab the link. That would be tough. I could figure it out, but I'd have to go off the screen maybe for a minute. If someone wants to take the next few questions, I can see if I can get the links for the things that we've been talking about. Just give me a sec here. You go ahead and take the questions, Johnny.
All right. I'm a realtor. May I notarize a quit claims for my client's investors to get a spouse of my client out of a deed, for example? I do not get benefit directly from the quit claims, but I have interest in it because I want to sell the property. I do have financial interest in the transaction when the property gets sold. to be quite honest, I can't give you an exact answer whether or not you can or cannot. That's going to be more leaning toward when it comes to interest in that situation. There's not a true yes or no. It needs to be, what if you think you're gaining something out of it. What I would truly recommend seeking advice from an attorney on that. They are going to give you a more clear answer.
What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to post the link to a landing page that we use for our notary reappointment seminar. And if you go there, there is a bulleted list of links down below. There's an ebook, which you probably won't need. Then there's the no notary wording handout, which is very helpful. Notary's responsibilities flowchart, which is very helpful. And at the very bottom, the link says Rulona rundown. So you could actually use the Rulona rundown or the notary wording, no notary wording reference sheet, because they both have the notary wording on them. So I'm going to go ahead and post that now.
John says, we're doing a great job, which we thank you for that, John. And he says he's disappointed that Mark, our president, is not golfing buddies with the Secretary of State. He needs to take up golf. I mean, if he doesn't, I will. I'm a golfer, so maybe I need to step in those shoes and see what I can do for us.
I think Mark's more into horseshoes. So how do I get notary notes if I don't get them? Terry asks. Terry, if you are a member, you should be getting the notary notes by email. We've only set out one edition. It went out on April 1st. The only reason you wouldn't get it is if we don't have your correct email, or if you're using a business email address. Sometimes business email addresses block certain domains. So if you are a member, you could switch to using a personal email address, and that could help. But call customer service if you're a member, and they'll help you out.
And she actually mentioned she just missed it. So it was just overlooked. So she now gets them, which is good news.
I'm sorry.
No,
I should have read on.
After the fact. Yeah. So that's great. And Susan says, thank you, Brian, for posting the link. Yeah, so we are at 3:51. We're going to go for about another 8 to 9 minutes, and then the room does shut down. So I just want to keep that clear to everybody, give everybody the heads up. When using a credible witness, do you need anything in addition to the entry in your journal? When you're notarizing for the credible witness, they're swearing out a verification on oath, and that's done on paper. They're swearing to the ID of the customer, and they're pretty much swearing that they're not lying about it. So they're going to sign it in your presence. You notarize that, and then that credible. Once you've notarized that form, that's when you can go ahead and notarize for original customer. So that's what's needed. If you're a member of PAN, if you log under the member portal and click on PAN forms, we actually have the credible witness form free to download. It's PDF fillable.
Yeah, I was going to actually say that. I'm glad you commented. I don't have to piggyback now.
Yeah.
If anyone needs to search their email account, search for notary notes at notary.org. Thank you for that suggestion. Before you shut down, I want to make sure I have time to say thank you to all of you. Thank you. And thank you for making that comment. We
appreciate that. Somebody asked if the recording will be available for members that were unable to join us today. So typical, what we used to do with the webinars is we would edit them and you would get an email later on in the evening. Zoom doesn't automatically do that. So what we're anticipating, this is what we think is going to happen. We recorded today's session and we're going to edit it. And then on Monday, we're going to have it posted to our YouTube page. So if you want to go back and watch it, all you need to do is go on our YouTube page, look for the Notary Penalty webinar, and you'll be able to watch it. So give us a few days to make the edits and it will be up. That's what we believe. I mean, this is our first time doing this, so we want to make sure it works, but that's what we're trying to do.
Joe wants to make sure she has the right form for the credible witness. The one you're mentioning there is not the right form. I believe the title is Form of Verification on Oath or Affirmation by a Credible Witness, I think is the exact title.
The exact title.
Got a bunch of thank yous saying this was great. We appreciate that. We know these were missed. We had a lot of people, contacting us from time to time asking about these. So we're going to try to get more of these out. At least we're going to try once a month. That's going to be our goal. And if we could do more, we definitely will. So if you have any suggestions, you could always throw it in the chat box what you want to see next, or email us and we'll take it in consideration.
There's a question from Shelly. You see it?
She says, yeah, why does the credible witness entry come before the person requiring the notary? Because you track your journal entries in chronological
Mhm.
order. So the first notarization you need to do is because you need to properly ID that original customer. So the way you're properly IDing them is that credible witness, and you're doing the notarization for that credible witness. So that's going to be your first notarization that happens, and then you'll move on to the original customer. So that's why it goes first.
Somebody asked if I could share the email address again. I put instructors@notary.org in the chat box. Darn, I hope I spelled that correctly.
I put it in there too.
Is that right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that looks right.
A lot of thank yous. Hey,
Priceless
appreciate it.
webinars. Yeah, I like that comment. Thank you.
Suggestion for webinars, Ron, is something which we did do back in November, but maybe we can do a little bit more research and get more information on it since it's been around a little bit longer. Something we can always consider.
So Juanita's asking, what if I've done it wrong and not recorded the credible witness oath first? I'll be honest with you. It's like anything. If you've done something wrong in the past, you cannot change the past. In fact, if you go back and you try to alter your journal, that's an alteration of the public record, and that's a serious crime. Just do it right going forward.
Yeah.
All right. So somebody says, Lord, thanking us for how quick and we're quick with the responses, easy to understand. That's awesome. Thank you for that. How can I save this chat? I do not believe that is an option that can happen, unfortunately, just because it is a live presentation. You will, however, get to go back, and if you want to watch the presentation and listen to the responses that we, when we answer, because we always read the question and then we answer it. So that's something you could always do.
And again, saying you're welcome to the people that are thanking us. It's neat to be able to see you. This environment is neat compared to Webinar Jam, where we couldn't actually see faces. So we can see people going like this. I'm sorry, no one's sleeping. But if they did, it would be kind of humorous.
Somebody had a decent idea. If you want to save the chat, you could always copy and paste into a Word document. It's not a horrible idea.
No.
So that's something. It might not be organized, but
Yeah.
you could organize it. So that's a really good idea. Thank you for that idea.
So do we have a problem with you screenshotting things from the chat? Nope.
Nope.
Not at all.
Just always keep in mind, things are subject to change according to the law or the regulations. We're teaching what's currently required and what's recommended, but as you could tell, as you see with the address, things do change over time. Just depends. So always, we're gonna try to keep you up to date as much as we can.
I think if you're trying to grab email links and things like that, websites, that's not a horrible way to use the screenshot, but I don't think we had too many answers that were actually in the chat anyway. Everything was mostly verbal. Yeah, it depends on the phone you use, how you copy, Amelia. I know with mine, you have to push buttons at the same time, or I can do a 3-finger thing where I touch all 3 fingers to my screen and it automatically does a screenshot. And I'm not very tech savvy, and I figured it out. So I did have to read the help function to figure that one out. But for the longest time, I couldn't do a screenshot.
Lisa asked if I'm asked to notarize a document that is in French and my credible witness is French and vouches for the document, can I notarize? The notary portion that you're going to be notarizing, your notary wording, the certificate of notarial act needs to be in English. That's key.
We don't honestly care what language the document is in.
But the notary statement, the venue, those things need to be in English.
Think about it this way. You're not responsible to read or understand a document anyway. So if it's in English, French, Lithuanian, Russian, it honestly doesn't matter. Okay, we are going to shut down the room in about a minute here. So we'll say our goodbyes. Thank you for attending. It's been fun doing this again. I'll tell you what, I feel a lot more comfortable doing the webinar now that I've had a chance to teach a lot of Zoom seminars. So that's great. I think John probably feels the same way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
We wish you a good weekend, and we'll see you the next time. Watch out for emails.
Stay healthy out there, everybody. Thanks for attending. We appreciate it. See you next time.
All right. Watch for social media posts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bye all.
See you, everybody.
Bye.